From a logical standpoint, the claim that the second Buga Sphere is completely fake contains a major contradiction. If someone merely wanted to fabricate a so-called alien sphere to deceive the public, then the simplest and most effective approach would have been to directly replicate the already well-known vase-shaped internal structure of the first Buga Sphere. The internal structure of the first Buga Sphere has circulated online for years, and many people already have a fixed impression of it: a central vase-like shape, simple symmetry, and an appearance similar to a traditional crafted object. Therefore, if a hoaxer's only goal were to create publicity or attract attention, there would be no need to redesign an entirely new structure that is more complex, more difficult to explain, and even more likely to provoke controversy. The more complicated the internal structure becomes, the easier it is to invite skepticism, the harder it becomes to justify logically, and the greater the manufacturing difficulty and cost. Yet the second Buga Sphere is exactly the opposite. Inside it appears a completely different technical arrangement: 4 copper columns, a central sphere, powdered internal materials, a complicated support structure, and an internal configuration that clearly does not resemble ordinary decorative craftsmanship. This design is not only drastically different from the first sphere, but also appears much closer to a functional technical device rather than an artistic object created merely for appearance. More importantly, many of the details do not resemble intentionally fabricated display features. Instead, they look more like genuine engineering traces left behind after actual operation. For example, the top of the central sphere contains numerous rotational friction marks. These types of marks are not something that would naturally form on a static, decorative object. If this were merely a hoax, there would be no reason for an ordinary fabricator to create subtle details associated with dynamic rotational motion, details that most people would never even notice. Furthermore, if the interior were purely decorative, the structure could easily have been made cleaner, more symmetrical, and more consistent with the public imagination of a science fiction device. However, many parts inside the second Buga Sphere instead appear highly engineering-oriented, and in some areas, even somewhat rough or experimental. This gives the impression of a prototype or functional apparatus rather than a movie prop. Therefore, when analyzed from the perspectives of fabrication motive and structural complexity, the second Buga Sphere does not appear to be a low-level fake. On the contrary, it seems more likely to be some form of genuine technical device whose actual operating principles are simply not yet fully understood by the outside world.